Hello and welcome to another Dwarven Tavern video. I am your host, Dr. Jeff Goins, and with us in the tavern,
Lyric Goins.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about backstories as far as your character goes in whatever role-playing game you're playing. This is an important thing because it adds a lot of depth to your character. And we have both played with a lot of people who are just really superficial about the characters, right? Am I right? Yeah. And they just roll up a fighter and they four, and they just play it out of the box, and it's not there's no thought. Yeah. There's no critical thinking, and we here at the tavern are all about critical thinking and the imagination. Once the imaginative juices begin to flow, it is like a flood.
But when it comes to rolling up characters straight out of the book, that's great. But as previously mentioned in another one of our mini videos, it's best to just use those books as guidelines, and yes, that's the bare minimum is going straight from the book.
Right, and it always says in the book. I mean, even especially the books, they say these rules are not allegory. These rules are only guidelines, and nothing is hard and fast. And in the future, we're going to do a video about how to effectively incorporate house rules into your campaigns, which my own campaign in my own world is rife with house rules.
All of our games are rife with house rules.
Sometimes we just make stuff up on the fly. Yeah. And that's the best games. It's the best games. And well, we'll get to that video when we get to it. But right now we're talking about backstories for your character and how important are they?
Do you want me to answer that question?
How important are they? Yes.
I have to say, I have got a lot of characters that have backstories, and I've also got a lot of characters that don't have any backstories. And for example, I'll give one of each. There's one character I have. They're both half-orcs. Surprisingly, I have a mad strategy of going with always a half-orc. Like, I had my first half-orc monk just blossomed my love for that race. But anyway, my first example would be my half-orc paladin. That's a thing. Yeah. The whole reason he's a paladin, it's a long story, but I'll give it briefly. His mother was part of a village that was raped and pillaged, and the village itself was, not the people in it. Yes, the people in it too.
Big earth elemental village.
But the village itself and the people in it were raped and pillaged.
Not by an earth elemental.
No, by orcs.
That would suck.
And the mother was left with a half-orc child.
Talk about feeling dirty.
Yeah, and by the time...
No, I'm talking about the rape of an earth elemental.
Can I continue with my story, please? But
that's in my mind. It's kind of stuck there. Can't get it out of my head.
Can I continue?
Please continue.
But his mother was impregnated with him, and during her pregnancy, being a human pregnant with a half-orc child would mess you up. And it did. It messed her up. And she went through with the birth, and she had a half-orc child. And his name was Bronx. And his mother went insane having a half-orc child. And she would beat him and abuse him and neglect him. And he was the sweet, gentle... He took after his human side. He was sweet, he was gentle, he was calm, serene, and he would just occasionally have an orc berserker rage
episode.
And
okay, well let me interrupt you there for a second, because that is very, very it's a very, very intelligent way to play genetics, because when you stereotype something, and I think the half orc is the perfect example of that. There, in any race, in any humanoid race, you would have dominant and recessive genes.
Mm-hmm.
And just because the aggressiveness, the orcish aggression and I don't know, notorious stupidity or just rashness, all that stuff would probably be a dominant gene. But sometimes, it just for my part, I have brown eyes, and 2 out of 4 of my youngins have blue eyes.
And one of us has green eyes, and
one
that's
has
us
green.
like back in like the great grandparents.
Yeah. So those recessive genes, and if you take just a little bit of time, and just make a little bit of effort to examine the science behind some of the genetic, recessive and dominant traits, you can come up with all kind of really, really cool options for your characters. So please continue.
I do those cards, but Bronx.
You're always changing your mind. So.
Bronx was he was very gentle, very calm, very serene, and his mother was abusive. And one time she had enough, and she got a sickle, and she was gonna kill him. No, a sickle. The knife that looks like a crescent moon.
Right.
And she cut at him, flayed open his cheek, and that caused him to go into one of his rages. And when he, got out of it, his mother was dead in front of him, and he had the sickle in his hand. And he was like 5 years old. So a 5-year-old going through that, he ran away from home because he knew he was going to get burned at the stake, because his entire village had been pillaged and raped. And if a half-orc child of this pillage and rape kills the human mother, then that's a bad seed. So he ran away from home. Of course, he was just a scared 5-year-old. He didn't even think that far ahead.
Right.
But he was on the road the next morning, and a couple paladin, they were a married couple.
A cup of
A cup of paladin, righteous fury. It's a drink to wake up your morning. But a married couple, they were both paladins, they saw him, and they're like, oh, you poor child! And they raised him as their own, because they couldn't have children. And he became paladin, and it was to make up for what he did in his childhood. And now his goal in life is to hunt down his father, and then end his own life, because he knew his life was what caused his mother to go insane, and he didn't want to bring that on anybody else. And he felt the only way to lay her soul to rest was to get rid of himself. And that's Bronx. He's a very sad character.
Yeah, he is. And that sounds like a little religious self-inflicted guilt.
Yeah.
Does he flagellate regularly?
I don't think so. I think he's
well, being a half-orc, he would probably flagellate and flatulate quite regularly. So,
but I don't remember if his god was Heronius or Palor, but he's one of the more lighter gods, is the one he follows. But the other example I was going to give was my mini, rooting through my mini half-orcs, the one that I think of very fondly is Baduk. And Baduk has no
now how do you
backstory.
spell that?
It's B-U
apostrophe
R-U-U-K.
Baduk. What are you gonna name it? Let's write that down.
But Baduk, he has no past. No, he has no backstory. He was my character that was supposed to bring me out of my shell, and that was what defined him.
Yeah, because for a long time in gaming, she is natural. You were naturally passive and not horribly assertive. So, as a dungeon master and licensed therapist, the words, I try to use role playing to help people get through crises in their lives, and she was having a serious crisis about being too passive.
Yeah.
So
I had social anxiety, a little bit of depression going on, and it kept me very reclusive. It kept me very quiet, and he helped me decide that I needed to roll up a character to basically be the polar opposite of what my attitude was, and that was mean and brutish and words. And he was snobby and rude and selfish and
nothing like her. I'm not I'm not being facetious.
And he was that was his backstory, was that he needed to help me, and because I don't honestly know where Buduk comes from. I don't know where he's going. I don't know what his purpose in life is. He's just there.
Okay, so what that implies is from these two examples, you have one character who none of his backstory was in game.
Right.
And that was the Bronx. That was Bronx. And Bronx's character was designed entirely before he started playing, that is a perfectly valid.
Oh, natural.
Yeah, that's a perfectly valid thing. And however, Bruk he didn't really have a backstory as much as he just had a sort of a set of guidelines as far as what his character was going to be, and which is in itself a sort of backstory, because a backstory doesn't have to be a written down chunk of text describing their past kingdoms and their past lives and blah 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 and all that poetic stuff. And
you can certainly create the backstory as you go in game. Like you can say, "Oh, well, why did you just roll that low?" It's like, "Well, when I was a child, this particular instance, doesn't water." Aren't you, terrified of water? Don't you have hydrophobia? Oh, yeah! So, it can, the backstory that you come up with, it can also be in-game, and it can be based off of the experiences your character has. Mm-hmm. So, it doesn't have to be written out and prescribed as Bronx's was. Right.
So, you can go either way with that. With how you do the backstory, but the point is that the backstory is important to create a deeper character that you can really get into, and that is wherein the fun lies. I think in the future we'll be doing some discussions about the various character classes in the various games. Although fighters, rangers, clerics, wizards, and all that stuff, that's a pretty generic encompassing of multiple games like Hackmaster and Castles and Crusades and the various other games that we have.
And this giant wall of text that we have.
The wall of text, but we can discuss those, and I think that would be a good idea for possible backstories as far as that goes. So, what are your parting thoughts? Do you have any?
My thoughts on backstories. Well, I've had a lot of instances where they were very useful, and other times that they were just I didn't ever use them. And then there are times where I just don't have them, and I guess it really depends on what character you want to have. Mm-hmm. For example, not using another half-orc because I just thought of one. I've got 10.
She loves half-orc.
But I can't think of a not half-orc.
No, I can. No, what I can see is this one horny orc running around like Zeus or Poseidon, getting all these chicks. Lyrics okay, I'll take that one, and I'll take that one, and I'll take that baby.
Yeah, that's me. I take the half-orc babies, and I nurture them. But I guess my parting words is be creative, no matter whose story it is. Be creative.
Name of the game right there.
And
actually the game's Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, but be creative would be also a very good one. Be creative.
Although it's not really connotative of what the actual game is.
But be creative. Be get inspired by reading backstories of other characters, maybe
Get
online.
inspired.
Get inspired. Get inspired.
Yeah.
And let your imagination go wild.
Yeah, don't just take it at face value.
Yeah.
Because you have to think, for every person out there in the real world, and that's not saying that the D&D world that you created is not a real world. You might just be channeling a separate dimension.
You could be.
You could be.
Or you just might be making things up.
Yeah, you might just be making things up. But for every person out there is a story. And there may be some stories that are alike and some stories that are practically identical, but there is a different story for every single person who exists, and that's over 8 billion stories. So creating a new story for your own character is not a bad thing.
And even if it's like someone else's, that's okay too. I'm pretty sure half of us in the entire world have had the exact same story.
Right,
so,
right.
I mean, why do you think we all like songs? So
Right. The more concrete you are. When I was doing my undergrad studies, we were talking about poetry, and they said when you talk about love and hurt and pain, that's all so generic that nobody can really relate to it. And the more concrete you are with your ideas, the more people can relate to it. And that seems counterintuitive to the way it should be. You know, I loved her so much my legs fell off or whatever. And that's
I'm so sorry.
That's so generic that nobody, not the legs falling off, but I loved her so much it hurt. Okay. That's so generic nobody can relate. It's like,
vomit.
Yeah, well, so what? But if you say something like, when we went to UDF that time and she gave me her whipped topping on a spoon and it got in my eyes. And that's when I fell in love. People go like, yeah, I had a moment where, my boyfriend or my girlfriend was a real idiot. And
Yeah, it wasn't that exact moment.
It wasn't that exact moment. But yeah, and so the more definite and the more concrete you are about your story, the better off you'll be. And it'll take the game to an entirely new level, and leveling up is what it's all about, except in Traveler, which we will be discussing later. But taking it to a new level and finding an enjoyment, it's kept me playing the game for about 30 years. 35
Oh, I thought
years.
you were gonna say, since lava was drying on the crust of the earth, you could have fooled me.
Yeah. Well,
He's old.
Yeah, my birthstone is not lava.
It's close. It's magma.
It's a sedimentary rock. So
I'm just teasing you.
I know. It's what you do. So,
That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, I know that's why we had you. That is our thoughts. Leave us comments or whatever, and let us know.
You could tell us about your backstory.
You certainly could.
Give some examples for those who are struggling out there.
Yeah, or even ask advice or whatever. We love comments and love talking about it.
Ooh, we could even... We have been putting out a storybook that could also be of benefit to you. It's called Dwarven Tavern Story Hooks.
Dwarven Tavern Story Hooks, yeah.
And it can start your story, but it can also give you reason for what you're doing. So take a look at that and see if that can help you out a little bit.
Yeah, I'm sure it's on the website, which is www.dwarventavern.net.
You almost smacked me.
And don't forget to look that up and check that out. I think it's available on Kindle and Amazon and etc. And have fun with that and let us know what you think. Okay, don't forget to like and subscribe and all that stuff. And for those on 9gag, it's measured in bananas or something like that. It's a weird thing. But don't forget to do all that good stuff and share the heck out of us. We love those shares and what people think. So,
on behalf of the entire cast and crew of the Dwarven Tavern, this is your host,
Jeff Goins.
And I am a member, Lyric Goins, and we wish for you to want nothing but adventure, and at first I feared it, then I charged. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.